It was a high-stakes night at American Pulse, a widely syndicated late-night political talk show known for its firebrand guests and combustible panel dynamics. The host, Clay Torrance, a seasoned provocateur with a silver tongue, had curated a tense episode bringing together Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and conservative firestarter Karoline Levitt. The studio buzzed with anticipation. The green room chatter had already hinted at friction. Karoline's staff smirked every time Jasmine's name was mentioned, and Jasmine, cool and poised in a navy power suit, simply smiled through it. As cameras rolled and the opening monologue faded, the panel launched into a fiery debate over criminal justice reform. Smine, calm yet firm, cited statistics, policy papers, and real-life stories with surgical clarity. "We legislate from lived experience," she said, "not inherited arrogance." Karoline, perched confidently in a crimson dress, leaned forward with the subtle grin of someone preparing a blade behind velvet words. "That's cute," Karoline said, her voice syrupy. "Remind us, Jasmine, what was your middle name again? Something biblical, wasn't it?" "Always makes me laugh." Like a gospel version of overcompensation, laughter erupted from Karoline's side of the table, including Clay's half-hearted chuckle. Jasmine's expression didn't change, but a collective shift in energy rippled through the audience. Then, slowly, a single pair of hands stopped clapping. Jasmine's mother, seated in the second row, clad in a quiet grey church dress and a subtle, wooden cross around her neck, rose without a word. Silence fell like a curtain. Even Clay's hand froze mid-gesture. All eyes snapped to the elderly woman who now stood in full statuesque stillness, her back straight, eyes unreadable. Karoline's laughter died abruptly, her smirk flickering as if slapped by wind. Jasmine turned only slightly, her voice soft. "Mom," but her mother, Pastor Loretta Crockett of the 3rd Ward Baptist Church, didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence, dignified and calm, filled the studio with a palpable unease. Clay cleared his throat nervously. We didn't know you were here, Pastor." She gave no reply, but the weight of her gaze now settled directly on Karoline, who tried to recover. "Oh, please, are we not allowed to joke anymore?" she said with a forced laugh. "Everyone's so sensitive." Jasmine's mother stepped down from her seat and walked slowly toward the stage. Not a word, not a sound. Security glanced at each other uncertainly, but no one moved. She stepped up onto the platform, eyes still on Karoline, who now looked increasingly out of her depth. Jasmine stood instinctively, placing a hand on her mother's arm, whispering, "You don't have to." But Pastor Crockett simply patted her daughter's hand, then took one single step toward Karoline and looked her dead in the eye. Mocking scriptures is never a joke, especially when the daughter of that scripture is standing before you with grace, clarity, and the courage of 3 generations of women who fought to speak in rooms like this. The words hit like thunder. Gasps rang out. Karoline looked stunned, blinking as though physically struck. Clay scrambled to regain control. We're here for a healthy debate." But he was drowned out by a round of applause that erupted not from stagehands or studio plants, but from the audience itself. Genuine, instinctive, and uncoached. Pastor Crockett turned to them briefly, gave a slight nod, and then returned her gaze to Karoline. "You wear your cruelty like a dress," she said, her voice low, but filled with centuries of struggle. "It's bright, it's polished, and it fools the crowd until it's standing next to truth. My daughter has walked into courtrooms where no one wanted her there. She's been mocked in back rooms, called everything but her name, and yet here she stands. You, on the other hand, have walked into television studios, where lights make people forget their decency. Jasmine tried to interject. "Mom, please!" But Clay cut in. "No, let her speak. The audience needs this." Karoline, now visibly rattled, stood but faltered. "I didn't mean anything that serious. It was just a name, just a little joke," she stammered. Pastor Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't budge. "Do you know what her middle name means, child?" Karoline, now defensively crossing her arms, shook her head. "Of course not." Pastor Crockett leaned in. Barely a whisper. "Her middle name is Hadassah. It means compassion, courage, and rebirth. She was named after a Jewish queen who hid her identity to save her people. Is Jasmine that queen? Not hiding who she is, but standing tall in it." The air grew so still you could hear the hum of the studio lights. The final minutes of the show unraveled into something unexpected. Karoline shrunk inward, her talking points abandoned. Clay, visibly shaken but professionally composed, attempted to bring the panel to a close with vague platitudes, but the damage was done. The studio audience remained half-seated in stunned awe, the other half standing with a kind of silent reverence. Jasmine gently walked her mother back to her seat, her hand trembling just slightly. When she returned to the mic for closing remarks, she didn't gloat. "Tonight wasn't about me," Jasmine said, her voice steady. "It was about what we tolerate and what we rise to confront. There will always be those who mock from comfort, but the people who built this country, they rose in silence. And sometimes silence walks stronger than a scream." She paused, eyes sweeping the room. "So tonight, I thanks my mother because she reminded me, and maybe reminded you too, that some truths don't need to be yelled. They just need to stand." With that, she stepped off the stage. The crowd erupted, not in chaotic cheers, but in a long-standing ovation that vibrated with weight. Karoline sat alone, her earlier bravado now a wilted memory. The cameras cut to Clay, who fumbled his closing lines. That concludes tonight's episode. Thank you and good night. Backstage, the silence continued. Jasmine and her mother sat side by side in the dimly lit green room, sipping from water bottles, saying nothing. A junior producer approached Karoline with her coat, but Karoline waved her off, eyes fixed on the monitor showing the crowd still on their feet. Somewhere inside her, a seed of something, humility, shame, or realization, began to sprout. But she pushed it down. It was just a joke, she muttered to no one. Meanwhile, Pastor Crockett stood, adjusted her cross, and turned to Jasmine. "Next time, don't let them steal your fire." Jasmine nodded. "They didn't. You brought it with you." Just then, an intern burst in, face pale. "Ma'am, Pastor Crockett, MSNBC just called. They want you on a segment tomorrow?" Pastor Crockett smiled, faintly. "Tell them I don't do interviews," she said, then turned to Jasmine. "Let's go." They walked out, not waiting for applause, not looking back. But as they disappeared into the hallway, Karoline, still seated, glanced up and caught one last glimpse of the pastor's back. And for a fleeting second, the weight of what she mocked, the name, the faith, the legacy, settled like ash on her shoulders. And though no one said it aloud, the message had been made crystal clear. In a world of noise, sometimes the loudest answer is a silent woman standing tall. The fallout from that night detonated across political and cultural lines like a controlled explosion, measured but undeniable. Social media lit up within minutes. Clips of Pastor Crockett's walk to the stage were stitched with gospel music. Her one line, "You wear your cruelty like a dress," is already etched into memes, TikToks, and protest signs. Overnight she went from an unknown church matriarch to a viral icon of spiritual resistance. But Karoline Levitt's team went into damage control "We need to reframe this," her communications director barked, pacing in her apartment. "Say it was a misunderstanding. Maybe you're a victim of cancel culture." Karoline stared blankly at the television, playing a rerun of the segment on mute. "No one believes that," she muttered. They saw the whole thing. Still, the next day, she appeared on a conservative morning radio show. "I was ambushed," she insisted. There's a double standard in media where a conservative woman gets vilified for jokes, while the left parades false moral superiority. But even the host, a known provocateur himself, sounded unconvinced. "Karoline, it wasn't just a joke. You mocked a name and got schooled by someone who didn't even raise her voice." The silence on the airwaves was heavier than static. Karoline hung up, mid-interview. In Washington, Jasmine Crockett found herself unexpectedly lionized. She had no interest in the attention, but it came regardless. Invitations from universities, editorial features, and handwritten letters from grandmothers across America who saw in her the dignity of survival. But she remained grounded. "This isn't about me," she repeated in every interview. "It's about how we treat each other, especially when no one thinks anyone's watching." Still, even with the public on her side, her congressional colleagues were split. Some, like AOC and Ayanna Pressley, offered public support. Others, particularly centrists who feared rocking the boat, remained conspicuously silent. "Don't get too comfortable," whispered one older congressman during a recess vote. "They love building you up so they can watch you fall." Jasmine didn't flinch. "Then I'll make sure I fall on my feet." Later that evening, as she stepped into her home, she found her mother sitting in the dark, sipping tea, eyes watching the stillness. "You did good," Pastor Crockett said. "But this isn't the end." Jasmine nodded, slowly. "I know," her mother continued, voice soft. "The devil doesn't strike once. He circles." And as if on cue, Jasmine,